"I will not fly with this incompetent man." Those were the words that shattered the early morning silence of the flight deck. They weren't whispered. They were shouted, sharp and venomous, bouncing off the high-tech instrument panels of the Gulfstream jet. Captain Marissa Hartman stood up so abruptly her chair slammed against the bulkhead. Her finger was leveled directly at the face of Evan Hayes, the new first officer. It was 6:40 in the morning at Teterboro Airport. Outside, the world was cold, dark, and quiet. Inside the cockpit, the air was suffocating. Marissa grabbed the cockpit phone, her knuckles white, and punched in the number for flight operations. She demanded a replacement immediately. She listed his faults. She called him sloppy. She called him insubordinate. She called him a risk to her license. Evan did not argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't plead his case. He simply sat there watching her unravel, his face a mask of absolute calm. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his own phone, and unlocked the screen. In that moment, Marissa Hartman thought she held all the power. She had the 4 stripes on her shoulder. She had the years of seniority. She had the reputation of a captain who took no prisoners. She believed she was about to crush a subordinate who had dared to question her. But she was wrong. She had no idea who was really sitting in that right seat. She had no idea that the man she was trying to kick off the plane didn't just fly the jet. He owned it. And she certainly didn't know that the phone call she was making was about to end her career, while the phone call he was about to make would change the entire aviation industry. To understand how we got to this breaking point, we have to go back to the beginning of the shift. The morning air at Teterboro was sharp enough to cut glass. It was one of those winter mornings where the sun looks like a cold white coin against a pale blue sky. Evan Hayes stood outside the crew briefing room with his battered leather flight bag slung over one shoulder. He was watching the line crew prep the Gulfstream on the tarmac. The jet gleamed. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a white fuselage that looked fast even when it was standing still. The engines were quiet for now, dormant beasts waiting to wake up. Evan had flown dozens of these machines. He knew their quirks, their sounds, their personalities. They were clean machines, reliable, built for people who expected perfection every single time they stepped aboard. He checked his watch. It was 6:43 a.m. The flight was scheduled to depart at 8:00 a.m. sharp. They had plenty of time for the walk-around, the briefing, the pre-flight checks. Evan had learned long ago not to rush these things. Rushing was the enemy. Rushing was how mistakes happened, and mistakes in the air were not like mistakes on the ground. Up there, at 41,000 feet, a mistake didn't give you a second chance. It just gave you a headline. He took a breath, letting the cold air fill his lungs, centering himself, and pushed open the door to the briefing room. Captain Marissa Hartman was already seated at the head of the table. She had her tablet open, her finger scrolling aggressively through the weather charts. She didn't look up when the door opened. She didn't look up when Evan set his bag down. She didn't look up when he pulled out the chair across from her. Marissa was in her late 30s, sharp-featured, with her hair pulled back into a bun so tight it looked painful. She wore her uniform with a terrifying precision. Every crease was sharp enough to draw blood. The 4 gold stripes on her shoulders were polished and prominent. Captain. She had earned that title. No one could take that away from her. She had logged thousands of hours, flown through storms that would have grounded lesser pilots, and she had never bent a piece of metal. On paper, she was exactly the kind of pilot you wanted in the left seat. But aviation is a small world, and stories travel faster than jets. Evan had heard the stories. Other first officers spoke about her in hushed tones in the crew lounges. They didn't complain that she demanded excellence. Any good pilot respects high standards. They complained that she was cruel. They described a person who treated the cockpit not as a team environment, but as a kingdom where she was the monarch and everyone else was a servant, specifically men. She had been vocal about it. In meetings, at events. She spoke about the industry being built on male privilege. And while she wasn't wrong about the history of aviation, her method of changing it wasn't through mentorship or leadership. It was through confrontation. It was through making sure every man who stepped into her cockpit felt small, unheard, and terrified of making a mistake. Avon didn't care about the politics. He really didn't. He cared about the physics of flight. He cared about getting passengers from point A to point B without spilling their coffee. He cared about coming home to his daughter at the end of the trip. That was it. Everything else was just noise. Marissa finally looked up. Her eyes swept over him, analyzing, judging. She took in the uniform, the bag, the quiet way he sat. She didn't smile. "You must be the new first officer," she said. It wasn't a greeting, it was an accusation. "Evan Hayes," he said, nodding respectfully. "Marissa Hartman." She didn't offer her hand. "I assume you reviewed the flight plan." "I did." "Good. We are flying a tech executive to San Jose. Wheels up at 8. Flight time is 5 hours and 20 minutes. Weather is clear most of the way. Some light chop over the Rockies, but nothing serious. Any questions?" "No." "Captain." Marissa leaned back, crossing her arms. This was the moment she usually established dominance. "I've been flying for 16 years. I've been a captain for 7. I do not tolerate mistakes in my cockpit. I do not tolerate sloppy procedures. And I do not tolerate men who think they know better than I do just because they have been flying for a few years. Are we clear?" Avon met her gaze. He didn't blink. He didn't look away. "We are clear." "Good." She stood up abruptly. "Let's get to the aircraft. I want to be wheels up on time." They walked out to the tarmac together, the wind biting at their faces. The Gulfstream sat waiting, ground crew finishing the final fuel checks. Marissa headed straight for the cockpit stairs, barely acknowledging the ground crew. But Evans stopped at the nose of the aircraft. He set his bag down on the asphalt. He began his walk around. He moved slowly, methodically. He started with the left wing. He checked the leading edge for any signs of bird strikes or hail damage. He ran his gloved hand along the underside, inspecting the fuel cap. Then the left engine. He looked into the intake. Clear, no foreign objects. No visible leaks. He crouched low, his knees cracking slightly in the cold, and looked at the landing gear. Tires were in good condition. Hydraulic lines looked intact. No fluid pooling on the ground. Then he saw it. It was subtle. If you were rushing, you would have missed it. If you were arrogant, you might have ignored it. A thin trail of reddish fluid running down the side of the strut. It wasn't a gush, just a weep. It caught the morning sun. Evan crouched lower, practically lying on the tarmac now, following the trail up to the connection point. There. A small weep at the fitting. Hydraulic fluid. The stain was old and dark, but there was a fresh, glistening streak running through it. That meant it was active. It was leaking right now. Evan straightened up and pulled out his phone. He took 3 photos from different angles, using the flash to illuminate the fitting in the shadow of the wheel well. Then he opened the maintenance app and logged the finding. Hydraulic leak, left main gear strut. Status pending inspection. This wasn't a choice. It wasn't a debate. This was the law. You cannot fly a jet with a hydraulic leak. Those systems controlled the landing gear, the brakes, the flight controls. A leak meant pressure loss. Pressure loss meant system failure. System failure at 40,000 feet meant an emergency. And an emergency with a VIP passenger aboard meant a lawsuit or a funeral. He finished the walk around double, checking everything else, and climbed the stairs into the cockpit. Marissa was already in the left seat. Her hands flying over the overhead panel switches, she glanced at him as he slid into the right seat. "Everything looked good?" she asked, her tone suggesting there was only one correct answer. "No," Evan said quietly. "We have a hydraulic leak on the left main gear. I logged it. Maintenance needs to take a look before we go." Marissa's hands stopped moving. The cockpit went silent. She turned in her seat, her entire body rigid. "A hydraulic leak." "Yes." "Show me." They climbed back out of the cockpit, back down the stairs, and walked to the nose gear. Avon pointed to the strut. Marissa crouched down. She looked at the stain. She looked at it for a long time. Then she stood back up, brushing imaginary dust off her pants. She shook her head. "That is nothing," she said, dismissive. "Hydraulic systems weep all the time. It is normal. I have been flying jets since you were probably still in flight school. I know what is dangerous and what is not." Evan kept his voice level, professional. "The regulations say we log it and have maintenance inspect it. That is the procedure." Marissa's jaw tightened. A vein pulsed in her temple. "I don't need you to tell me the regulations. I wrote half the training manuals for this company. That leak is not a safety issue. We are on a tight schedule. Our passenger is a billionaire who does not like delays. If we scrub this flight over something this minor, it reflects badly on both of us. I already logged it," Evan said. "Maintenance has been notified." The irritation on Marissa's face curdled into something colder. "Something personal. You went over my head without consulting me first. I followed the procedures. You undermined my authority." Evan didn't respond to that. There was nothing to say. He stood his ground. Marissa stared at him, her eyes hard, calculating. Then she turned on her heel and marched back toward the cockpit. Evan followed. When they were back inside, Marissa didn't go back to her checklist. She picked up the cockpit phone and made the call. "This is Captain Hartman," she said, her voice dripping with controlled rage. "I need to speak with Director Cole immediately." There was a brief hold. Evan sat in the right seat, hands resting on his knees, staring straight ahead. He could feel the heat radiating off her. "We have a situation," she said into the phone. "My first officer logged a non-issue on the aircraft, and now we are delayed. I am requesting a replacement. I will not fly with someone who does not understand the difference between a real problem and a nuisance finding." She paused, listening. Her eyes flicked toward Evan, narrowing. "No," she snapped. "I am not overreacting. This is about competence. This is about someone who thinks he knows better than a captain with 16 years of experience. This is about a man who cannot handle taking direction from a woman." Evan didn't move. He didn't defend himself. He let her dig. "I'm telling you right now," Marissa continued, raising her voice. "If you do not replace him, I'm walking off this flight. I will not risk my license flying with someone who is going to second-guess every decision I make." He is trying to assert dominance. He is trying to undermine me because he cannot handle the fact that I am in the left seat. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Marissa's face changed. The anger was replaced by confusion. Then shock. "What do you mean I should discuss it with him directly?" she snapped. "I am the captain. I am telling you I will not fly with this man. I am not asking for permission. I am informing you." The voice on the other end said something else. Something short. Marissa's grip on the phone tightened until her knuckles were white. She pulled the phone away from her ear and stared at the screen. The call had been ended. She turned to look at Evan. Her face was flushed, a mix of embarrassment and fury. "You need to call your director and explain yourself." Evan reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his phone. But he didn't dial. He simply unlocked the screen and held it up so Marissa could see the contact list. At the very top of the screen, saved under favorites, was a name, Director Cole. Below that, another name, CEO Sterling. Marissa's eyes moved from the screen to Evan's face. For the first time, she looked uncertain. The certainty was cracking. "Who are you?" she asked. Evan put the phone back in his pocket. He turned to face her fully. "I am the co-founder of this company," he said. His voice was calm, devoid of arrogance, stating facts. "I own 49% of the fleet you are sitting in right now. I've been flying since I was 19. I flew combat missions overseas before I ever touched a civilian aircraft. I came back, built this business from the ground up, and I still fly because I love it. Not because I need the hours. Not because I need the paycheck. Because I love it." Marissa's mouth opened slightly. No words came out. The silence in the cockpit was absolute. "You can call me incompetent," Evan continued. "You can call me inexperienced. You can call me whatever you want. But you will not ignore a safety finding on one of my aircraft. You will not put a passenger at risk, because you are too proud to wait for a mechanic. And you will not accuse me of undermining you when I am doing exactly what every pilot in this company is trained to do. Outside, the ground crew had stopped working. They were watching through the windscreen, sensing the tension. Marissa stood up slowly. Her face had gone pale. The blood had drained away, leaving her looking tired and exposed. She looked at Evan, then at the phone in her hand, then back at Evan. Her mind was racing, trying to find an exit, trying to salvage the situation. "I was testing you," she said quietly. It was a weak lie, and they both knew it. "I wanted to see if you would follow procedures even under pressure. That is all." Evan didn't respond. He didn't give her the dignity of believing it. Marissa forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "You passed. Good work." She turned and climbed out of the cockpit. She moved quickly, her shoulders stiff, her phone still gripped in one hand like a lifeline. She didn't look back. Evan watched her go. He watched her descend the air stairs and walk briskly toward the terminal. The ground crew exchanged glances but said nothing. They knew when to stay out of cockpit business. Evan stayed in his seat. He pulled up the maintenance log on his tablet and reviewed the entry. Hydraulic leak, photo attached, status pending. Everything by the book. He had done nothing wrong. He had done exactly what the regulations required, what the company required, what safety required. 10 minutes later, the white maintenance van pulled up. 2 technicians climbed out. Evan met them at the nose gear. The older technician crouched down, wiped his finger along the strut, and held it up to the light. "Fresh red fluid." "You were right to call it in," the technician said. "This fitting is loose. Could have blown out on landing. We'll get it fixed, but it's going to take an hour, maybe 2. Do what you need to do," Evan said. The technician glanced toward the terminal. Captain Hartman already left. She looked pretty upset. Evan didn't respond. He walked back to the cockpit and sent a message to Director Cole explaining the delay. Cole responded within a minute. "Understood. Passenger has been notified. Take your time. Do it right." Evan leaned back in his seat. The sun was higher now, warming the tarmac. The flight was delayed, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that the aircraft would be safe. 40 minutes later, the cabin door opened. Evan turned, expecting the ground crew. Instead, a man in a dark suit stepped inside. He was tall, lean, with silver hair combed back. Daniel Cross, the passenger. The billionaire software mogul worth $8 billion. Cross stepped into the cockpit and extended his hand. "You must be the pilot." Evan stood and shook it. "Evan Hayes, first officer." Cross smiled slightly. "I know who you are. I looked you up after they told me about the delay. You're one of the owners, right? Co-founder?" Evan corrected gently. Cross nodded. "I figured. Most first officers don't get their names on the company website." He glanced around the empty cockpit. "So, what happened?" "Hydraulic leak," Evan said. "We caught it during the walk around. Crew is fixing it now." "And the captain?" Cross asked. "I saw her leave earlier. She didn't look happy. She disagreed with the decision to delay the flight." Evan said neutrally. Cross raised an eyebrow. "Disagreed with the safety call." She felt the issue was minor. Cross studied him for a moment. "I've been flying private for 12 years. I've flown with dozens of pilots. The good ones don't take chances. They delay flights. They scrub trips. They make the boring, careful decisions that keep everyone alive. The bad ones. They try to impress you by pretending nothing is ever wrong." He looked directly at Evan. "You made the right call." "Thank you, sir. I'm in no rush." "Take your time." Cross left. Evan sat back down. The validation felt good, but the knot in his stomach remained. He knew this wasn't over. When the maintenance was finished and signed off, Evan called Director Cole. "We're ready. Do we have a replacement captain?" Cole sighed on the other end of the line. "Marissa is insisting she fly the trip. She called me twice. She says she overreacted and wants another chance." Evan's jaw tightened. "She refused to follow safety procedures." She tried to bully me. I know, Cole said. But she's threatening to file a formal complaint if we pull her. She's claiming we're retaliating against her. She's already building a narrative. If we ground her now, she'll take it to HR. We need to handle this carefully. Fly the trip. Document everything. 5 minutes later, Marissa climbed back into the cockpit. She didn't look at him. She slid into the left seat, stiff and mechanical. They flew 5 hours to San Jose in absolute silence. It was the coldest, most sterile cockpit Evan had ever been in. When they landed, Cross thanked them and left. Marissa shut down the engines, grabbed her bag, and walked off the jet without a word. Evan stayed behind to fill out the logs. Then he went to his hotel, called his daughter, and tried to sleep. But his phone buzzed. A message from Cole. Marissa filed a complaint. She claims you created a hostile work environment. HR wants a statement tomorrow. Evan stared at the wall. He had expected this. She wasn't going to let it go. She was going to burn it all down. The next few days were a blur of meetings. Evan flew back to Teterboro. He met with HR. He showed them the photos, the logs, the messages. He explained everything. 2 days later, Marissa was placed on administrative leave. She responded by hiring a high-profile lawyer. She sued the company for gender discrimination. She claimed Evan abused his power as an owner to intimidate her. She demanded reinstatement, back pay, and a public apology. The company's legal team dug in. They pulled her records, and what they found was a pattern. Over 3 years, Marissa had 6 incidents with other crew members. Verbal abuse, dismissiveness. 2 first officers had requested never to fly with her again. 1 had quit the industry entirely. The company had ignored it because she was a star pilot, and they feared the PR backlash of firing a female captain. But the smoking gun wasn't her past. It was the present. The cockpit voice recorder. Every word spoken in that cockpit had been recorded. The legal team listened to it. They heard Marissa's rage. They heard her refusal to look at the leak. They heard her accuse Evan of sexism simply for doing his job. And they heard Evan, calm, professional, unshakable. The lawyers said, terminate her, defend the lawsuit, do not settle. But before they could act, the story leaked. Someone posted the details to an aviation forum. It went viral. Social media exploded. People took sides. Feminist groups rallied around Marissa, calling for boycotts. They painted her as a martyr in a boys' club. Then, the voice recording leaked. The internet listened, and the narrative flipped overnight. They heard the toxicity. They heard the arrogance. The support for Marissa evaporated. The FAA opened an investigation and suspended her license. She had signed for an aircraft she knew had a maintenance issue. That was a violation of federal law. Marissa Hartman's career was over. But for Evan, this wasn't a victory. It was a wake-up call. He called a meeting with the executives. We failed. Even told them. We knew she was toxic, and we did nothing because we were afraid of the optics. We put passengers at risk. What do you want to do? Cole asked. Would change the culture, Evan said. We create a scholarship program. $50 million. We find people who have the heart and the discipline but not the money. We train them from day one that safety is not negotiable. We teach them humility. The program launched 2 weeks later. It was a massive success. Thousands applied. Single moms, veterans, college grads drowning in debt. 1 year later, Evan stood on the same tarmac at Teterboro. The sun was rising. A new Gulfstream G700 was waiting. Beside him was Sarah Brennan, the first graduate of the scholarship program. A former Army logistics officer who had applied on a whim. She was nervous. It was her first revenue flight. You ready? Evan asked. Yes, sir. Yes, Evan. They walked to the jet. Evan watched her do the walk around. She was slow. She was methodical. She checked every bolt. Then, she stopped. She crouched down by the landing gear. She stayed there for a minute. She stood up and looked at Evan. There's a small hydraulic stain on the right main gear, she said. It looks old, but I want to log it and have maintenance look at it. Evan felt a wave of relief wash over him. Not annoyance. Relief, good catch, he said. Log it. The technician came out. It was a non-issue, residual fluid from a previous repair, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that she had seen it, and she had spoken up. They flew to Miami. It was a perfect flight. When they landed, Sarah thanked him. "Why did you start the program?" she asked him as they walked to the terminal. Evan thought about Marissa. He thought about the screaming, the ego, the lawsuit. "Because," Evan said, "I got tired of hiring people who thought they had nothing left to learn. I wanted pilots who understand that flying is a privilege, not a right." That night Evan flew home to his daughter. He sat at the kitchen table, watching her do her homework. She was focused, checking her answers, methodical. "Do you like your job, Dad?" she asked. "I love it," he said. "Why?" "Because when I do it right, people get home safely. And that's worth all the hard parts." Evan realized then that the industry didn't need more rock stars. It didn't need more aces, with egos to match. It needed professionals. It needed people who would crouch down on a freezing tarmac to check a weeping valve. It needed people who knew that the most important thing about flying wasn't the power, but the responsibility. And looking at the future he was building, one scholarship at a time, Evan knew they were finally on the right course.